By the time you're watching this, you should have completed your issue proposal. Your position paper. And I'm sure that is a relief because that and the annotated bibliography are the two biggest burdens of this semester. So now we have two small assignments left. And I want to talk about the first of those, which is the Rogerian argument. Rogerian argument is an entirely different kind of argument because when we're talking about the position paper and the kind of argument we've been talking about this semester is persuasion, trying to shape people's thinking to conform with what you think is the more responsible position. Rogerian argument is not about winning, and it's not about changing people's minds to conform to your own point of view. It is about compromise and conflict resolution, which makes it entirely different than what we've done up till now. And this is probably something that you can use. You've been locked in your house with your family for quite a while, and I'm sure there have been some conflicts and disagreements that have popped up. And it'd be useful to have a way to deal with those conflicts in a constructive way rather than just a yelling or disruptive way. And Rogerian argument gives you the tools to do that. This is real world argument. It's the kind of thing, we talked about this early on. Chances are you're not going to make a single argument and turn people's opinion around 180 degrees, especially when it's about day-to-day things. And sometimes we have disagreements about simple things. Sometimes they're really significant things. But if we're going to live with people, we have to find a way to make peace with them. And because if we don't, friendships fall apart, marriages break up, families become alienated from one another. And if we can have a way, it's amazing how quickly sometimes those things happen. If we can have a way to solve problems through negotiation, and if we can have the skills to do that, it can be really constructive. And this is what I use in my life with people. I decide one of the best pieces of advice I ever got came from my brother, and he told me, choose your battles wisely. And I realized that there are very few things that are worth alienating people over or losing relationships over. And when these arguments start, sometimes we don't know where they're going to end up or what the cost of them will be. So approaching it in a little bit different way can be really beneficial in terms of maintaining relationships, because that's really more important than getting your own way, or it should be. First of all, before I talk about what Rogerian looks like, I want to point out that it is based on compromise, and compromise means each party gets some of what they want, but not all of it. And each party gives up some of what they want in order to find a resolution. Okay, so I want to tell you a story. When I was, my first roommate in college was named Hope. There were three of us that lived together, Hope, Rochelle, and me. Hope was second generation American from a Japanese family, and they had a habit of leaving their shoes by the door. It was part of their tradition to take their shoes off at the door and leave them there. And Hope had a lot of shoes. And she went through 3 or 4 pairs of shoes a day, depending on what she was doing. And so her shoes would all be lined up by the door. And I came from a family where at the end of the day, all of our stuff got taken to our room. We couldn't leave it sitting around the house. So that became an issue for Rochelle, the other roommate, and me. There were always lots of shoes lined up by the door. So one night when Hope was out, Rochelle and I started picking up her shoes. We lived in a 2-story apartment, and we just started throwing the shoes up the stairs. So when Hope got home, all of her shoes were strewn down the stairs. It's not a mature way to deal with that issue. So she was mad, and when she got mad, we got mad, and we had to find a different way to deal with this issue because it's just shoes. It was stupid. But it had the potential. I mean, we'd all lived together because we liked each other and we had fun together, but it had the potential to really disrupt that living situation. And the last thing we wanted was to end up living with people that we didn't even want to talk to because we were all mad. So there has to be a different way to deal with that. And Rogerian argument is a way to deal with that. It works on the micro level, roommate issues, family issues, friendship issues, but it also works on the macro level, meaning Rogerian argument can be used and is often used in diplomacy, in international relations, to solve problems between countries. Because when we have conflicts with friends and family, it can alienate us from those people. But when countries have conflicts that they can't resolve, it could lead to war, which has a significantly higher cost for the world. So it's a really useful way to deal with issues. So I want to walk you through some of the assignments on modules to help you understand what is involved in Rogerian argument and how you can use it, because you are going to write a Rogerian argument. Okay, so let me switch screens here to our, this is modules. This is week 14. We're approaching the end of this, and you'll notice there are a series of resources there that you can use to help you know what Rogerian argument is, and then begin to write your own Rogerian argument. So I want to go to the first example, the Rogerian letter. Here we have a document, an example of a letter gone right and a letter gone wrong. We're going to begin with the letter that went wrong. So we might imagine, I did not send this letter to Hope, but I imagined it later in life as an example. If you were to read this letter, I want you to stop the video and read this first letter and see what kind of language that you see. If you were Hope and you got this letter about the shoe situation, how would you feel about it? I want you to look for what's called loaded language, the words that are very judgmental, words like piled up. They were not piled up, they were stacked neatly. But that could be a judgmental word. So I want you to look through here and look for some of the language that you see as judgmental, see what the tone is, and imagine how you think this might be either constructive or destructive to the relationship. Okay, so stop the video and take a second to read this. And then if you scroll down, here is a second example. This is a Rogerian example of the way that I might have approached this situation. And if we look at what's different in this letter, okay, so stop the video again and read this letter. And I want you to think about what's different. If you'll notice in this example, some of what's different in this letter is that I try to, and again, I didn't send her this letter, this is just for demonstration purposes. I try to put myself in her shoes and understand why this might be important to her. When I'm angry about it, I'm only looking at it through the lens of my own perspective. When I can put myself in her shoes, then I can see it differently. So what I try to do in this letter is imagine why this is important to her. This is a part of her family tradition. And if I ask her to stop doing it, I'm asking her to stop doing something that her family has always done. I also tried to consider other reasons that she might think this is valuable. For instance, she thought it was pretty disgusting that we wore our street shoes into the house. That's a valid point. I can't argue with that. Probably is pretty disgusting. So the first thing I did was I began to put myself in her shoes. Then the next thing that I did was I tried to explain to her my perspective, that I had come from a different home environment where we were expected to put everything away. My dad was very tidy, and we had to have everything put away at the end of the day. And I kind of when I lived with people that weren't from my family, I kind of expected them to do things the way my family did, and they didn't. And so that took some adjustment on my part. So the next thing that I did was I tried to establish common ground. I tried to think about, look, we lived together because we liked each other. And what we all want is to live together and enjoy this time. None of us wants to hate each other by the end of our year together. And she felt that way, and I felt that way. And so that became our common ground. And then finally, I proposed a compromise. What could we do to solve this so we're not all angry? One thing that I thought would be a reasonable compromise was that we would all take our shoes off at the door. That way, none of us would be wearing our dirty shoes on the carpet. And that would satisfy her. It would also show respect to her tradition. And then at the end of the day, we would all take our shoes upstairs. So only on any given day, only that day's shoes were by the door. So that was a really valuable way to get some of what I wanted, some of what we wanted, and to give a little, to be accommodating. So that's what we're aiming for in a Rogerian argument, to put ourselves in the perspective of the other person and show respect for their point of view. Then to explain our own point of view, not in a way that says I'm right and you're wrong, but in a way that says, just so you can understand me, I'm trying to understand you. So now, and I've listened to you talk. We always let the other party talk first, or explain their position first. And then we begin to explain our own position without any judgment. Then we think about our common ground. What do we both want here? And then finally, we propose a compromise. A compromise is not, if you will do what I want, I will quit complaining. That's not a compromise. A compromise is, if you will give something up, I will also give something up. But we will both gain something, and that'll be beneficial for all of us.